Hello folks, LA Little here with the weekly wrap. It's March 22nd, so let's get into it. Looking at these numbers here, big moves to the downside again. Look at gold, just a collapse, taking it back down to just barely up on the year. But, across the board, not looking so good, right? Dollar up, everything else is down. Fear's palpable when everything goes down, which it did. If you look here at the mega caps tech, right, they're just not able to help this market out. And if you go back and look at from 1029 forward, they're down 15%, whereas the S&P down about 2.5%. So you can see the underperformance is taking place. If we move over just to the technical side here, it's all oil, right? Is oil peaking is the question. We did an over-under, a lot less volume. My question is that the top? Probably going to test it again. I mean, we got stuff coming out this weekend with Trump saying that, he's going to bomb infrastructure unless they open up the Hormuz Strait. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm very surprised. I expected us to take the Marines in there and just basically take them off those ridges, but maybe that's not possible. I don't know. So whatever it is, this is a problem. And if I look at the ABCD projections, there's a new one out here that says, you can go to 147. So 147's another, 15% or so? I hope that's not the case, but if it is, that's a problem. Getting a little bit stretched here on the MTTF, so I think we're getting close to something to the downside. If I look at another key factor, and that's interest rates, you can see here I got it on the daily. It broke on the weekly as well, so you got to break out on the daily and the weekly. This is a problem, right? As interest rates go up, they pressure everything. They pressure the economy in all forms and factors. And now that you've got these breakouts, you've got a lot of support underneath here. So unless something changes dramatically, this is a problem going forward. Last week, all the indexes broke, and they broke on the daily and the weekly time frame. If this thing begins to bounce, I expect that you're going to see first resistance come in here. I'm looking at a daily chart on the S&P 500. If you look on the other side and you say, okay, well, what if it escalates lower? Well, we go to the weekly chart here. You can see the percentages, 2.5%, 5.5% to get to the next areas that I deem as important. Right now, if it were to bounce, I think it could get as high as 4% if you're looking at it on a weekly time frame. So daily, 66. Weekly, you could get up about 4% or so. The last thing I'd point out here is on the sectors. Last week I showed how all these sectors look the same. They all got these rolling tops. Well, one of the first ones down, and usually this is the way it happens. One of the first ones down now is starting to show relative strength. So in other words, we're getting low enough to where people are interested in potentially buying. That's the XLF. It was flat on the week, and that's telling me that, the market has sold down enough, at least in this one sector, which was the first sector to break, along with mags, to start finding some buying interest. So we'll have to monitor that, and we'll also have to monitor the mags to see if they finally get some support. On the secondary indicators, I want to point out here that you actually have the bullish bear breadth now showing extremes. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to bounce initially and immediately, all right? But it does say that we're getting to the point now where you can actually see this thing start to influence buying behavior, and that is that you get beat down far enough to where enough things turn negative that it becomes positive, and we're at that point. So the bottom line here, from my perspective, we've reached a point where we're potentially going to see this market bounce. Whether it happens immediately, whether it happens another week or two, whether it happens from 2.5%, 3.5%, 4%, 5% down, we don't know that. What we know is we're getting close enough to where the bounce potential is there, and those probabilities are starting to shift. And so, for 3 months now, it's been kind of a market where you just could not buy anything because it just wasn't favorable. The odds were not favorable, the probabilities, as well as the reward to risk. Now that's shifting, and you know it will at some point, and now it's shifting. And so I would say that we're getting to that point where we're going to see a bounce, at least, right? Could be a bottom, but at least a bounce. And that's where I'll leave it today. Have a great one. See you next time.